So you may have gathered by now I wasn't totally thrilled with the way Fugly ran, and I was blaming myself. You know, I thought, geez, I must have taken that intake too far. That was where I went first, because that's where I spent the most amount of time. Yeah, I cleaned up the transfers a little bit, but I didn't do much else. So I tore it apart, took a look at the top of my piston, and that's kind of a mishmash. I'm thinking, did I do that? So I went back and started looking at my transfers again. Now you got to remember, my tool stopped. I didn't touch anything past right about there. So I never got into the cylinder. So I started looking a little closer. And what I did was I put a piston ring in there. And you may or may not start getting a clue what's going on. And it's hard to tell, but there's two problems with the transfers as it came. And I went back and looked at some other video, and yeah, it was the way it came. I just didn't really pick up on it. The first is this, but there's sort of a random top edge, and then on the other side, oh, I wish it would focus, darn it. You can see spots where the tool stopped and then dug a little bit deeper. So the net of this is one transfer port where it enters the cylinder is higher than the other. So that means it begins to fill sooner. Not a lot. I'm thinking, you know, that by itself. So I started looking further. And it's, if you look at the stocker, for example, on the intake side there, see how far back the transfer exits relative to the intake port? Now on this aftermarket, one reaches that point, the other does not. And I'm talking by, you know, a fair amount. We're talking, but this side here never gets back far enough. It's just the way it came. 50 thousandths maybe. And see how far that one goes back to the intake side? Let's flip it around. That transfer never even gets close to as far back, and instead of digging into the top, it dug into the bottom. Boy, I wish this thing would focus. I'm having a hard time getting it to focus so you could actually see what I'm talking about. The net is they're not even close to being symmetric, and so what I'm going to try to do tonight is make them at least symmetric and at least go back as far as stock, if not a little more. See if we can make it run a little bit better than that. I'm not really pleased with that at all. You know, it would be easier for me just to take a stock one and do what I want to do, but I just wanted to see if I can make this aftermarket one run at least as good as stock. The funny thing is, even as goofy as that is right there, this damn thing barked pretty hard. It would definitely, I believe, would beat the stocker. I've got a stock one in the garage I fired up a few minutes ago. And even, I don't know, it makes me laugh because Bob was talking about the same kind of goofy ports he had on one of his 372 cylinders. Well, this is goofier than goofy on the transfers, and transfers are really, really critical for scavenging. So I guess it goes to show that they can be pretty far out of whack and still have the darn thing run. It's just not running as good as I want. And I just want to see if I can make it work. It's not because of anything other than it's a puzzle. I just want to see if I can make this aftermarket cylinder sing. So a little Dremel tool later, I put that ring down in there. Got it pretty close. Not perfect, but certainly a lot better than it was. I also made them more symmetric, and I also brought them to the front more. So they're a little closer to where each other are. They're still not quite as far as stock. Stock goes another 15-20 thousandths. But anyway, didn't want to do anything radical. I just wanted to see if I could open up the one side that were radically smaller than the other side, and also the timing was different on one side versus the other. Just get it in the ballpark, and maybe it'll run a little bit better now. Well, what we're going to do here is sort of a unscientific experiment. And I've got two 350s. I've got the one that I sort of doctored last night a little bit because it had some issues. And I have the original Fugly 350, which is really a John Thread 2150 blended with a Husqvarna 350 and some ugly parts. And, you know, it's been in a farm rotation for a couple of years. It's got a flat top piston. It had a 5/8 muffler mod, tube type muffler mod, and it's got a black ignition, and it was built with no base gasket, so it runs at least, if not better than a standard 350. So here's my experiment. Fugly 2, the one with the aftermarket cylinder that had just atrocious machining in the transfers, didn't run that bad, which brings up a whole nother set of topics. And I want to see whether or not the goofy things that I did to it make it worse or match a stock 350. So the definition of win is if this Huztl with the mods runs as well as a very lightly modified standard Husqvarna 350. And again, the standard means OEM jug, no grinding on the ports at all, built with no base gasket, a flat top piston, and a muffler mod. That's all it had. And the Huztl is the one that you've seen in the last two videos. So what I'm going to do is make a couple of cuts with the Huztl as it is, take the bar and chain off, put it on the other saw, make a couple of cuts and see what we have. The other qualifier here is I really haven't tuned the Huztl top end yet. I don't really know where that is, whether it's too rich or too lean. I might do some of that as this goes on. But for right now, I'm just going to go for it and just film the whole operation, and then I can cut and hack what I want for the video. But this is just raw data. tell you right now, it's quite a bit healthier than it was. I think that's going to show up. It'll also just beat heck out of that 455. It's not even the same league anymore. It still binds a little bit, but at least it's going to bind equally. Just to review the course of events, is I took that one and ran it and was ending up with like cuts on the 24-25 second range. Remember last night I was in the 27 second range for the same saw. So that was a little disappointing. And it was really disappointing when I took the farm saw there. Of course that's a mature build. It's got an OEM cylinder with an OEM flat top piston, built with no base gasket and the muffler mod. So it's a slightly modified saw. It barks. It's also well broken in, and it ripped off like a 20-second cut. I'm going, man, oh man, oh man, I guess I went backwards. So then what I did was I went back to this saw and tweaked the carburetor, where I just actually set the no load right at the top of where that rev limited ignition's going to be. And you know, it picked up a lot of power by giving it some fuel, just like I did yesterday. And next thing I know, that saw there was ripping off 19-second cuts. So 20-second, 19-second, really that's a statistical tie. The net is this, is the OEM cylinder is way better when it comes to the uniform nature of the transfer ports. The quality of the machining on the transfers is way better on the stock. The last 200 thousandths from where I stopped messing around and where Huztl had their machining, that saw that the tops of the transfers varied like 20 thousandths. There wasn't one that was the same. And all I really did last night to that saw was I pulled it apart and saw that mosaic for a scavenge pattern on the top of the pistons and set about trying to get the tops of those transfer ports even. So by eye, I got pretty close. They're off a few thousandths here and there, but they're a lot closer than they were. And the other thing I did was take the rear set of transfer ports, the two towards the back, and made them even where they exit to the back of the cylinder. And they're still not exiting as far back as a stock. Well, tuned up, and after that modification, that saw went from 27-second cuts down to 19. So what that tells me is that top section of the transfer ports is where that saw needs work. And it also tells me that should I want to take a saw and use that strategy to modify it, I'd be way better off starting with an OEM stock cylinder, bottom line. So to those people who are thinking, you know, I'm hawking aftermarket parts, this is a tangible and measurable and demonstratable case where the OEM cylinder is way better than the aftermarket. And even though I was able to make the aftermarket run about as good as the OEM, it's an awful lot of effort to go through in order to make it do that. I can tell you right now, as the cylinder came, it wasn't half as much of a saw as that one is right now. So I guess the second part of this is, as much as my modifications to this point in time fly in the face of convention for 350 and 346 Husqvarnas, the fact of the matter is that saw went from being a pig to being okay yesterday, making those 27-second cuts, which was a match of my 455, to being quite powerful today, making 19-second cuts, matching what used to be my 50cc work saw right there, which does bark. That thing's that cuts very well. That's been a long time staple in the farm work rotation. So just making that saw, making Huztl 2 or making Fugly 2 match Fugly 1, I think that's a victory, but a bittersweet one. And I think what I gather out of all this is, again, the difference in quality between the OEM and the aftermarket, and in particular the way the transfers are manufactured. And the second thing is those modifications, they did something. It sure didn't go backwards, because there's no way in hell that saw as it came out of the box, or that cylinder as it came out of the box, was going to be even close to that one right there. Sorry guys. To those who say we're going in the wrong direction, maybe, but we went in a right enough direction to make it match that saw, so that's a victory in of itself to me. I don't know if I want to continue working on that cylinder. It's a good working saw right now. Again, it's a match of Fugly 1, a little bit faster maybe. It's an anomaly because it's an aftermarket. My instinct tells me that if I work the exhaust, work the muffler a little bit bigger, and really pay attention to those transfer ports, there's still a lot of power left in that saw to play with. But is it worth it? And that's the next question. Spend 3 more hours of screwing around with it. Do I get something that's worth the effort? I guess the comments are going to tell me, should I go further with this and take it to my conclusion. I actually had a plan for that saw. I'm about 2/3 of the way through the plan. It's not quite as good as I expected it to be, but again, I think I figured out why. But looking at the way the transfers are, I'm kind of at the point where I might say, you know something, I think I'd have more fun taking that build and and taking one of my other OEM cylinders and doing that build on that instead, because I think it would generate quite a bit better results. So anyway, I think I've said enough for tonight. I'm going to bring these saws back to the house and sit down and ponder what I've seen and stick together a video, and based on what I get for comments and replies, I either continue to the last phase of where I wanted to go with that saw, or I just leave it alone and then take a stalker and move it to where I have that one first, and then to what I had planned in a later video. That's up in the air right now. Talk to you later. Bye for now.